All right, a live look to Texas this morning. We're expecting an update next hour, 11 o'clock Eastern time, on the response to the deadly flooding. The death toll has now topped 100, with the search for survivors entering day 5. And you can see the devastation from this aerial view. They are searching right now by air, land, and water. Crews are exhausted. About 24 people are still missing. 10 girls and a counselor from Camp Mystic are among those unaccounted for. 27 people from that camp were killed. Concerns have been raised about cutbacks to the National Weather Service. The agency says timely forecasts were issued in the lead up to the deadly surge, though the mayor of Kerrville, Texas, admits he never received a warning alert on his phone. Joining me now to discuss is Rick Spinrad. He's the former National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Administrator during the Biden administration. Good morning, Rick. Glad that you could be with us. So let's get straight to it, because there are a lot of questions being raised about the forecasting and the communications surrounding these floods in the pre-dawn hours, Friday, Saturday. What are your thoughts? Did staffing cuts have an impact here?
So there's a few important things to recognize. The first is that the forecast was excellent, and that watches and warnings, which are the formal communications that raise the red flags, if you will, were issued in a timely manner. The first watch, which basically puts up a red flag and says, hey, we need to pay attention, went up on 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, the day before the floods. At 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday, a flash flood warning went out with wireless emergency alert, which indicated that the flooding could be considerable and catastrophic. That was some 3 to 4 hours before the flood actually hit. The challenge here is in what's called the last mile. So you can have a great forecast, as the Weather Service did, but if it's not picked up by emergency managers, if it's not received by those who are in harm's way, then you're not able to effect an evacuation and save lives. And so now there's a lot of work going on looking into just how that last mile of communication did or did not work. And it's noteworthy that one of the functions in the Weather Forecast Office in Austin, San Antonio, one of the critical weather forecast offices here, was operating without a position called a warning coordination meteorologist, which would have been the person who worked directly and continuously with local emergency managers.
Yeah, I believe I read about that position, and that person, took early retirement because of cuts that were coming down from DOGE. Is that correct? Is that why that position was vacant?
That's right. There were a number of different ways in which positions were eliminated or people were pushed into retirement or early separation, and this individual left in the end of April, and so that position is unfilled. Roughly half of the 122 weather forecast offices around the United States are operating at 80% or less staffing, and some of them, a handful, are not able to operate 24/7. These forecast offices were operating around the clock, but again, the disaster hit in the dark hours of the early morning, and so there are some questions about the efficacy of people receiving the warnings.
Yeah, and another aspect, and I don't know if you want to comment on this, is the lack of sirens, which other communities have, even close by to Kerrville, but they didn't have any sirens going off, which could have alerted people to the danger.
Yeah, my understanding is they've looked into the placement of sirens for some years, and I can't comment on why or how that did not happen, but I will say that it is standard practice in attention to emergencies like this. Think about areas where there are tornadoes or major storms, to have multiple warning systems. You want redundancy so that there's no single point of failure. And in the Midwest United States, there are many towns that obviously depend on these wireless alerts, but they also have siren systems in place. So anytime you can duplicate the capability to warn people, you're going to be in a better position.
And then there's the question of whether or not an evacuation alert would have made a difference, because, of course, there is a danger in just that process alone. I do want to ask you, though, when you add it all up, Do you think that lives could have been saved had there been improvements, whether in the forecasting or in the communication or with the messaging? Rick, what are your thoughts on that?
One thing to realize with a flash flood, and I think some of the videos that your viewers might have seen, is that you don't necessarily have to evacuate very far. It's not like a hurricane. As long as you're going uphill, in some cases it can be a matter of a quarter of a mile, a kilometer or two. So I do think that if, especially the kids at the Camp Mystic had gotten word in time and been able to pile into buses and cars and go up the road a bit, they may have been, their lives may have been saved. So I would venture to guess that with some more warning, there would have been more lives saved.
I'm actually going to squeeze in one last question, and that is about this area. And of course, the camp was on the banks of the Guadalupe River. Given how flood prone this area is, what happens in the future? Do you think that they will rebuild there? Is that safe?
I can't comment on what their plans are, but I can tell you that we saw a very similar kind of flood in 1987. People tend to talk about these as 100-year or 1,000-year floods. The better way to think about it is the probability. And there is low probability of another event like this down the future, but it's not zero. And so you have to ask, is it worth spending X dollars to protect an additional 50 lives? And that's a decision the local authorities will have to make.
Rick Spinrad is a former NOAA administrator. Rick, really appreciate your time and your expertise this morning. Take care.
Thank you.